Good evening, everyone. I just want to welcome you to the Eastside Freedom Library's second event on the Hillcrest Golf Course redevelopment. My name is Ben Werner, and I'll introduce myself more fully in a moment, but I want to lay out tonight's agenda and some ground rules. So first, we're going to start off by talking about how we got here. Then I want to give a background and summary on the Hillcrest redevelopment process. I also want to summarize our last event and take a moment to talk about what TIF or tax increment financing is, because a lot of you have sent me emails asking me what that is. We're going to spend the majority of our time tonight in breakout groups, and then we're going to report back. Here's some housekeeping. Please be respectful of others and share the space. We're all different, but we're here to come together as a community. Listening is as important as sharing. Feel free to use the chat to ask questions or share comments. We'll try to respond as we can. And I just want to let you know that we are recording tonight's event to share with others. We're also live on Facebook, but we will not record any small group discussion, and you're welcome to turn off your camera if you would like to do so. So who am I, and why is the Eastside Freedom Library hosting this conversation tonight? My name is Ben Werner. I am the Housing Justice Program Director here at the Eastside Freedom Library. We're coming together in this space as part of the work of Eastside Housing Justice, which is a working group of nonprofits who are dedicated to advancing housing justice on the East Side. I'll take a moment to talk about our history and then go in a little more specifically about why Hillcrest and why we're here tonight. In 2019, Cian Thomas of ABC Realty approached the Eastside Freedom Library to host an initial event on the racial housing gap. The racial housing gap is the fact that in Minnesota, among homeowners, 75% of white Minnesotans own their home, and only about 25% of Minnesotans of color own their home. So we came together to hold an initial event and ask the question, why is that? What's going on? That initial event led into an entire summer of programming. We showed Jim Crow the North, we showed Detroit 48202, and time after time again, the community kept coming out, talking about what was on their mind and sharing how they were feeling. What we heard consistently, in particular as we approached the first Eastside Housing Summit in November 2019, was that there needed to be a program dedicated to responding to the community's priorities that we were hearing over the course of this event. We took a brief hiatus when COVID hit us. We came back in September to respond to a lot of those initial community priorities and have been designing and fleshing out a program since then. At the forefront of the Housing Justice Program at the Eastside Freedom Library, we have always believed in education, community building, and democracy. And that is why we came into the space this evening. What does Hillcrest have to do with this mission? Part of Hillcrest is the fact that we are researching and implementing values-based strategies to address historic and systemic inequities in housing on the east side of St. Paul. One tactic that we're using is we're exploring the Equitable Development Scorecard for use on St. Paul's east side. The Equitable Development Scorecard is a tool that the Alliance for Metropolitan Stability, in conjunction with a lot of community partners, created. And essentially, it's a tool that allows the community to score incoming real estate developments to see how equitably they will serve the community. So Hillcrest is a really great opportunity to make sure that development is indeed serving the priorities and needs of the community. So as I mentioned, I'm going to start off by doing an overview of the Hillcrest development process. For some of you who attended my first meeting 2 weeks ago or attended the city's meeting, this may be a little bit of a repeat. I understand that, and please be patient so we can all get on the same page and talk about this as a community. Hillcrest is a 112-acre former golf course on the east side in the greater East Side neighborhood. The site is now owned by the Port Authority with the master planning process led by the city of St. Paul. You might be wondering why the Port Authority owns the site, and I'm not going to get into it as much as I did during the first meeting, but the soil at the site is contaminated from its use as a golf course. Again, we have a video on YouTube from our first event that goes into that a little in more depth. I'm not going to do that tonight, but just know that the Port Authority came in because they have a strong track record of remediating contaminated soil and are the best ones in the city to do that. So they approached the former owners of the site. The city of St. Paul issued bonds to allow the Port Authority to purchase the site and do the soil remediation. Part of that allowed for the city of St. Paul to be part of the master planning process. All of the information about this process and everything else that I'm going to talk about tonight is found on the Port Authority's website or the city's Hillcrest website. So I want to define as well, what is PED at the city and what is the Port Authority? Because I think it's important to understand what they do and why they're involved in this. St. Paul's Planning and Economic Development Department, or PED for short, builds community wealth through business, housing, jobs, planning, financial, and cultural assets. To achieve this mission, the department administers a variety of planning, housing, business, and economic development activities. These activities support a number of community initiatives and also provide direct benefit to homeowners, home buyers, renters, and businesses. The work of PED is overseen by the mayor, who works for you. The St. Paul Port Authority was originally established to administer the Port Authority of St. Paul. We have working ports in the city of St. Paul, and that's how they got their beginning. They then moved on to develop marginal lands along the Mississippi River for business and industry, but have since expanded to act as a citywide development agency, which generates its own revenues and funds its own budget. Currently, they're responsible for a lot of the industrial development that occurs within the city of St. Paul. The Port Authority is managed by a 7-member board of commissioners. The commissioners are appointed by the mayor of the city of St. Paul to 6-year terms. 2 members of the St. Paul City Council sit on that board. So going back to Hillcrest, on August 8th, the city of St. Paul agreed to take on the master planning process. What does that mean? It means that the city is going to work to set the land use and zoning regulations for that site. From August 8th to September 6th, applications were taken for a community advisory committee. They also constructed a technical advisory committee. Approximately 70 people applied for the community advisory committee, and the mayor appointed the members. Who is on that committee? There are 11 or so appointed members, 3 St. Paul residents, 3 Maplewood residents, a planning commissioner, a housing representative, a business representative, a District 2 or the Greater East Side representative, and a transportation representative. The city hired a consulting firm to lead the community engagement work. On February 15th, the city held its first forum for the plan. There were approximately 220 to 230 engagements with the community to create a draft of 20 community priorities. 160 were at a community forum, 22 were at online surveys, 48 were in 3 pop-up events. They created these 20 community priorities, which the community advisory committee later voted into place at the next advisory committee meeting. I do want to note that although the pop-up events engaged with a more diverse range of residents, both the community forum and surveys had engagement from mostly older white residents. 2 draft plans led to 2 revised draft recommendations, which I'm going to go over now. Some of you may have seen us at the city's meeting last week or at mine 2 weeks ago. Again, just trying to get everyone on the same page. The revised draft 1 of the city's plan is called the Hilltop Plan. It allows for a large hill in the center of the golf course to remain while other parts of the site are developed. You'll see on the left-hand side here that this type of plan prioritizes households over jobs. It also has more green space than the other plan. It allows for a total of 1,151 units of housing, the vast majority of which are medium density. If you look on the right-hand side here, this is a snapshot of this plan. The purple will be light industrial. The darker blue is a wetland. The green is open space. And the other colors are housing. That sort of multicolored circle there in the middle is a node where a lot of retail and residential will come together. The next version of the plan is the jobs focus of the plan. And you'll see on the left here that this balances out to allow just about as many jobs as households to come onto the site. However, this comes at the sacrifice of some of the open space. This allows for about 903 units of housing being constructed, with more low density and fewer high density and medium density housing types. Now I want to take a moment to summarize our March 9th event. Around 40 folks attended that meeting. We summarized the city's process to date, very similarly to what I just did, although I expanded on what the process has been. And again, please watch the YouTube video at Eastside Freedom Library on YouTube if you'd like a little bit more information. You can also check out the city's Hillcrest website. We partnered during that event with our reparations reading group to discuss how Hillcrest and other major developments might be used to build wealth among communities of color, especially through St. Paul's new Reparations Commission. We heard from our neighbors a number of key takeaways after we held those breakout groups. I have summarized those key takeaways. They were spoken in at least 2 of the breakout groups. We held, I think, a total of 7, and most of them were said in all of the breakout groups, or at least half. They are as follows. 1, there needs to be deeper engagement across diverse demographics, including Indigenous voices in the planning process. 2, parks, trees, and green space matter to the community. 3, the community wants a net zero emissions development through partnership with the community. 4, we need to further discuss how Hillcrest and future developments can build wealth as part of the City of St. Paul's Reparations Commission. 5, we need prioritization of jobs and businesses for our communities of color, in particular the descendants of enslaved African peoples. 6, there needs to be deeply affordable housing at Hillcrest. And 7, the community would like to see a community center at the site. Now I want to take a moment to talk about TIF. And this is a complicated concept, and I say that because I myself have struggled to wrap my head around what TIF is, but a number of folks asked me to give some clarification on this. TIF is currently not allowed on the site as a result of the bonds, a condition of the bonds that the city offered to the Port Authority. It can be overturned through the city council vote, but as it stands, it is not permitted. TIF is a tool used by municipal governments to stimulate economic development in a targeted geographical area. TIF finances projects or other improvements using the anticipation of future revenue resulting from the new development, future tax revenue. The future property taxes pay for the improvements. Typically, the completion of a public or private project can at times result in an increase in the value of surrounding real estate, which generates additional tax revenue. Sales tax revenue may also increase and jobs may be added, which also adds more money to the area. TIF is a strategy for municipalities to self-finance a redevelopment project without having to raise or impose new taxes. A TIF district is often one of the only options for municipalities that generate revenue for affordable housing through low-income housing tax credits to finance new development. Once a TIF district expires, the municipality receives the full benefit of the property taxes on a much higher property tax base than would otherwise have been present without the investments. The key point that I'm bringing up here is that TIF is a strategy to help fund affordable housing at this site. So here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to discuss this further. I will also send out this presentation at the end of tonight's meeting, so you'll have my contact information through there as well. In the meantime, please follow us at Eastside Freedom Library or the Eastside Housing Justice Facebook groups. So let me take a moment to look at the chat to make sure I touch on everything before continuing. Okay, one of the questions that I'm seeing is why was TIF not involved in Hillcrest? I'm not sure. I wasn't part of that decision, but I will keep a record of that and try to get back to you. Rami asked about creative planners and architects. I'm not sure if the trees have to go down. we can speak about that more with the city. So that being said, let's go into breakout groups. I will move over. So I want to preface by saying, historically, Eastsiders have not had a platform to raise their voice and have also been divided as a community. This is an opportunity for you to unmute yourself and talk to your neighbors. So the only question that we have going into these breakout groups is, what are your priorities for the site? So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to open up these breakout rooms. If you are on the computer, you'll see an option just to enter right in. If you're calling in, I can move you over to a group. And if you're calling from your phone, you should be able to tap and see a little option to join the breakout rooms. So give me just a moment here and I'll go ahead and do that. Hey, Anne, how can I help?
Hi. So we believe the question, well, I believe the question was to ask each other what would we like on the site. But then majority of us on the call, we weren't on the first meeting. So if you can help guide us a little bit.
Sure. So mainly the question is just to talk about what your priorities are for the site. What would you like to see? You know, I don't think it's necessarily important to know all the details of the site as they are. I think what's more important is, if there is a large development like this, what would you like to see there? There's a list of 20 community priorities, which I can drop in the chat here, that were created by those engagements originally. I can also include a link to the city's site where you can see the different plans and perhaps read through it together. That might be helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, that looks like just about everyone. I'm going to share my screen again here. So tell us what you heard. I'm going to send out notes to everyone who registered, as well as this presentation, but the rest of the time today is to report back from these groups. So just tell us what you heard. That's kind of my framing question. And I'm going to be writing down what you bring up.
Do you want us to just jump in?
Well, why don't we go group by group? So let's start with group one.
Hi, my name is Q Vang. I actually sit on the CAC committee as the housing representative. And I did kind of do a high level overview of what I know from being on the committee. But I did take notes because I was extremely interested to hear more community voices. So the few things that I took away was the need for more green space, the need for more green space, as well as preserving the trees, the need for affordable housing, whether it be single family up to for single family, multi-generational, as well as senior housing. And we definitely emphasized on affordable, the need for indigenous voices to be heard, to be sitting at the table. Other things that we heard was concerns about the development or the light industrial buildings that could potentially go in there, and not really understanding the need because the people or everyone in the group wanted to see more housing than what was being proposed in both of the plans. Another big one, which I love, is the need for a community garden. Having a dedicated set aside for people growing food. I think that many of us who are or were from the Greater East Side, the Greater East Side is a huge food desert, and having to be able to grow your own food is definitely in need. So those were the 4 or 5 items that were highly discussed in my team.
Thank you for sharing. How about group number 2?
Who was in group 2?
That was Andrea, Charlie Townsley, Cindy, Jean Comstock, Janelle, Raquel, and Tom.
Okay, this is Jean. My internet is a little wonky, so I'm going to look funny, but I think you can hear me all right. We talked, I would say, primarily, we probably talked about housing. And Janelle was with us and from Freedom from the Streets. And we talked a lot about the need for not just affordable housing, but what she called deeply affordable housing, which would be like 30 to 40% of the median income. And she said, essentially, there's like 2% in the Twin Cities as a whole that was deeply affordable. So we really felt like, gosh, there probably was a need for that. And she mentioned the, you know, the little houses, being able to put those up that would house like one person. There's still a need for that. So we were talking about, you know, if there were areas where we could do some of that. And certainly it seemed like something that could bear a little more thought and discussion about that. I think on the whole, people kind of like the Hilltop version a little better than the other one, which seemed kind of dense and not as interesting looking. Let's see, we talked a little bit about jobs, not a lot. I put in my plug for how I would really like to make this energy efficient, this development. In fact, net zero would be great. And the other advantage to that, of course, is that it would almost certainly lower the cost, the energy burden for people. So if we're going to put in affordable housing and so forth, we got to have affordable energy too. And this would really help. Let's see. There was one comment about some concern about the streets, but we talked about how the streets would be a little bit offset. They wouldn't be strictly, you know, raceway one, you know, streets you'd go steaming down, that there would have to be a little bit of navigation in there. And I think those are the main things we talked about. Oh, and then we talked a little bit about how we would like to find out more from the Port Authority as this plan goes forward. And let's see. I think Tong suggested just subscribing to the plan would be a good way to keep track of it. And personally, I noted that I really like this kind of meeting where we get a presentation, we can go talk about it and then come back and give some feedback. So the communication is going both ways on it. And I think that was it, unless someone in the group had other things to add.
I think that was great, Jean.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so room 3, that was Allison, Clarence, Daniel, Julia, Carla, Linda, Sam, and Zoe.
Sure. So our conversation went a little bit all over the place. So if other people would like to jump in, I'd like to invite them. But you know, I think the broad strokes, our conversation underscored the need for just more extensive community engagement. We had folks from both St. Paul and from Maplewood. I think the folks from Maplewood were expressing a lot of investment in this project, but there was some widespread, I think, confusion or just apprehension. So I think some specific outreach to the different immediate geographic communities will be really important going forward. You know, I also think we talked about even just looking sort of at the draft housing policy. I think there's a lot of good in there, but I also think that could really stand to be expanded upon. I think particularly in light of the city council changing the definition of household, I think more specificity on how this development will reflect that and truly provide a diversity of housing options. That's my cat chiming in the background. I'd like to echo what people say about the need not just for affordable housing, but deeply affordable housing. I think this is a pretty incredible opportunity to pursue that. Let me just 1 second. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, which was, I may have lost it. Oh, well, I guess I think one sentiment that was really brought up in a nice way was that the relationship between housing and businesses, particularly retail, I think is a really important one to get right. Whether we're talking about food deserts on the Greater East Side, or whether we're talking about needing retail or businesses that are actually a draw, not just for the immediate surroundings, but for people who live in the housing that is going to be proposed as part of this project. I think we would really love to see more direct exploration of what that's going to look like, how businesses are going to be reached out to, and so forth. So, thank you.
Could I add something that I
Sure.
thought we talked about? Was the equity building aspect of what the purpose is over there in the east side, is to build equity for the persons who've not been able to do that in the past.
Thank you, Carla. Group number 4, we have Brian, Carol, Joan, Matt, Stephen, and Tim.
Sure, I can report out on that one. We mostly focused on the placemaking and environmental aspects of the site, which, feeling good overall about it, but there's some things we definitely want to focus on. For example, trying to make sure that there's a good community gathering place, like a community center or a rec center like we have already in Hayden Heights over here. Just it's important to know that there's something that draws the community together that they can be proud of, and make sure that those amenities are located, accessibly to everybody. As far as the net zero, that's really great. We're very excited about that and the energy aspect of that. But transportation is also a big part of that, because building emissions are one thing, but we also need to make sure that we're not getting a ton of vehicle emissions and traffic and smog and noise. So just making sure that we get good transit access, that maybe can link in with the rapid transit that's being put up in the east side, as well as safe bike and walk routes, because the east side does not have enough safe bike routes as it is. So we want to make sure that it's real accessible that way. And then of course there's the ecology that's already there. There's the trees, which understandably some of those have to be gotten rid of, although it'll be really good to make sure that some of them can either be saved, or that we can make sure that when the various buildings are going up, that trees are really integrated into the land that they're on, so that we have kind of a good forest canopy in the site. And I think that's all that I had, unless Carol maybe wants to chime in.
Well, we went all over the place, but I think you covered most. We were also talking about, as you said, that some of the neighborhood fearing traffic increases on neighborhood streets. And we spent a little bit wondering about the jobs, but I think you did a good job covering what we talked about.
Thank you very much. Room 5 was Elizabeth, Jamie, Janet, Katie, Lisa, Matt, Peter, and Rami.
Okay. What we thought was that given COVID, in spite of the diversity that we see in front of us, the input process has not been as inclusive as it should be. We think that the project should be either stopped or delayed, and that the input process should be increased, should be elongated, so that we can really hear the voices that need to be heard. We had several neighbors living in the neighborhood. A lot of us see the incredible value of what appears to be a gem of a potential park there. We know it needs a haircut, but we did think that that might be a great spot for actually having the community meetings, drawing people to that site so they can really understand what they're talking about. The other thing we realized was that we were a bunch of white people, and there are housing needs and there are job needs, and we really need to hear voices talking about that beautiful site and how they may relate to that. So please, anybody else chime in if there's something else that we we talked about that should be said?
We talked about potentially making a kind of celebration on the golf site, and having the presentations done there, but make it really attractive. Have the Somali, hire some Somali caterers to bring food. Have the city make it the kind of thing that is really attractive to come to. It's not just a presentation.
Party, a cultural celebration.
A cultural celebration.
Yes.
And do them multiply during the summer. They could be linked to, the police do all of these community engagement things over the summer. Why can't the city and the Port Authority do that? Because 230 people is not enough to give feedback on this. And there should be specific outreach of, hiring the district councils to go door to door in the summer and talk to people and invite them to these events. Reach out to the American Indian Magnet School, reach out to the schools, get the youth involved, because they're going to be inheriting this in the future. So let them have a chance to share their vision about what they'd like to see.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Sorry to cut you off, Rami.
I would just add that I think right now the plan one, the Hilltop version, is better than the other, but we're missing an opportunity to have a much more engaging space. It feels like it's just industry, housing, and not something that's integrated in the community, really. It becomes, and then not having enough services, which was brought up, that if it's a food desert, you need some grocery store or some access. And the small businesses give also another kind of opportunity for employment and engagement and connection. So the types of, it's just a beautiful site, and I don't think they've begun to really maximize the potential of that site. And maybe there's more parks, because parks can actually help with economic issues. It sounds funny, but they do. And so it just needs more work.
Rami, you were going to say something?
Well, just that I had looked at the Ford plan as opposed to the Hillcrest plan, and it's just boring and boxy. There's no really public art. I know Monty said, yes, we'll have public art. Yes, but where is it? Highland Park got all the great planners and landscapers. Why didn't we? There's an inequity in terms of design and aesthetics going on here. And why shouldn't everybody have the top of the Maslow scale and the green space that we need? But yeah, I think the more important thing is the voices being a part of this.
Thank you. There are a few more groups I want to get through, but I see, Janelle, that you raised your hand. So why don't you go ahead, and then we'll keep going.
I just wanted to say that I don't know. Like I said, I'm born and raised in St. Paul. When she said Somalians, okay, I'm African American, and I got Native in me. And basically, my people built Minnesota. If people don't know, the Capitol, my great granddaddy was the architect of the Capitol. We've been fighting for many years to be knowledge. And it seems like we do, African American or not African American, but Black American people do not get knowledge. We don't get knowledge at all. Everybody race get knowledge. It's like when we was in a camp, they disbarred everybody. It's like, oh, we're gonna go find the natives and go and help them, put them in a hotel, go put them in whatever. When the people out here in color that's out here, and then y'all just want to put it up, shove them in the shelter, shove them this way, shove them that way. It's good to talk about everybody's culture. Don't leave nobody out, because people feel bad. And I went to a meeting one time with the state people, and they was like, putting Somalians up there like, oh yeah, they be in the shelter, they be this and that. But I bet you this, if it was a lot of people of color that was there, it would have went down, because I don't want it to go down. But I'm just saying that when people are talking about things, they gotta realize what is St. Paul is made of. What happened in St. Paul? What's going on, and what's going on today? Today, real life. Things are getting torn up. Things are getting messed up. People are going crazy over things. And I just want people to understand that everybody's culture got to matter in St. Paul, everywhere, especially the East Side. We had so much hell in East Side on there. Like I was telling another lady, I was chased with bats and everything else. I'm 45 years old. And I shouldn't even have to go through that stuff on the East Side. Scared to be outside at nighttime past 6 o'clock. You know, I just wanted to say that because I just want to let people know that I am an African-American person, and I just want to be acknowledged, and I want my people to be acknowledged. Thank you.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate that, Janelle. Let's go to room 6. We have Chelsea, Joan, Joanne, Leslie, Margie, Pat, and Sandra.
We were pretty much all over the place too. One of the comments I think that was repeated a lot was that we need more input from the people whose lives are going to be affected by this development. It's not just the people that live in that area, it's the potential of people coming to that area also. So we need to open up the dialogues much more. We also just felt that the port, we still don't have a clear picture of what exactly is going to happen there. Housing, affordable housing, those are all very broad terms. Light industrial, just exactly, what does that mean? We also brought up the fact that, if you're going to put 1,000+ people there, the closest fire department is over on Craig and Maryland, and they only have 2 pumper trucks because they got rid of our ambulance service on the east side. So if you're going to increase the population of our area by 1,000+ people, we need some amenities that go along with that to make sure it's a safe and it's a welcoming and engaging community. I don't know, anybody else in our group want to throw in their thoughts or ideas that we talked about?
Yeah.
To go along with the amenities ideas, there were some questions about transit and bus service to that area for the new people who will be living and working there. And there's not a lot of access in that part of St. Paul right now.
I also have concerns about where are these children going to go to school? I mean, the closest school is Hayden Heights.
Right. And it's not big enough.
It is certainly not big enough to absorb those children. And then all the rest of the schools around here are magnet schools. So, I mean, we're talking a lot of buses because St. Paul buses most of their kids.
Yeah.
I'm still interested to know if the families will be living in Maplewood and go to 622 or living in St. Paul. I'm not getting it, because everybody's talking like St. Paul, but
it is St. Paul.
It is all St. Paul, Carla.
It's all St. Paul.
It's all St. Paul, not Maplewood at all.
Yeah.
So why are the 3 people on there? The 3 people on the board from Maplewood?
Because they live across the street from this development, and it's going to affect their lives also.
Okay.
I think 2 of the things that I got out of this is one, in terms of soil remediation, that we really need to know, because there's going to be 2 levels of soil remediation, one for business and one for residential, of what proportion and the costs are. But it's also with soil remediation, the adjacent neighborhoods are also going to be affected or already are being affected by all of the chemicals from the golf course. The second is, I think, I can't remember who said it, that St. Paul Parks and Rec are not interested in any other land, that they are capacity unless there's some kind of additional funding for them. But they are not looking at any additional land. So we need to look at that in terms of green space and upkeep. And I think the last is the criteria of who we sell the parcels for housing and for business, in terms of once those are sold, it's my understanding that Port Authority no longer has any oversight on those folks in terms of what they do with it. Is that an incorrect statement?
We just had a lot of questions about how the Port Authority worked, and yeah.
So a lot of our discussions may be academic, and we really need to know if we're just sort of horsing around with this, and then once it's sold, forget it, because that's certainly, I see that with the Ford side. There was a lot of input, a lot of flurry, and this is what we ended up with. And granted, it's a different purchasing with that, but that's the issue. Is there going to be any power that the Port Authority has in terms of selection criteria for business developers, for housing developers, and after the parcels are sold?
Sian just dropped in the chat, the Port Authority does not currently have an accountability system in place to ensure the jobs go to Eastsiders.
No, it does. I believe it does.
I think that they're working on one for this, Jane, but I don't think it's in place just yet, unless I'm misunderstanding. Oh, you're muted, Jane, sorry.
I'll simply say that it's under their policy guidelines for jobs. The hiring is supposed to happen in the immediate vicinity, and they've been working with the Eastside Employment Exchange to make sure that that happens at 3M. So I would assume that would happen here, but that is part of their employment policy.
I can add from the perspective of the St. Paul Port Authority. I'm Andrea Novak, and I am with the Port Authority. When you look at a Beacon Bluff, we do have workforce agreements in place for a period of 10 years. And so we're very selective on who comes into those business centers and making sure that they're bringing the right jobs and the right benefits and the right type of businesses to St. Paul. So that is a very selective process. And that work is going to be happening once we have a master plan in place. So I think what you're going to see in the master plan doesn't have all of the details that a lot of people are looking at right now. And that's because that'll be that step 2. And as that transitions, you'll be hearing a lot more from us. But I will say that if there's groups or individuals that really want to just sit down with the Port Authority to learn who we are, what we do, and reacquaint yourselves with us, please let me know. I put my email address in the chat.
I'd like to say something about what Tong Tao had mentioned in the chat, which I think is relevant before we just get stuck on exactly what we see might be happening here. And that is that he says, in regards to small business, White Bear Avenue still has a lot of vacancies for grocery stores, retail, a lot of redevelopment potential. I mean, White Bear Avenue is horrible. I mean, why doesn't the Port Authority look at putting something there and look at the benefits to the immediate neighborhood and the existing uses there, and then looking back at that beautiful green space and conceiving it in a way that will be more beneficial to perhaps people who might want to live there?
I agree, especially because that is a bus line.
Yes, that's true. It should have been the rush line, in my personal opinion, but that's me.
Thank you, Rami and Stacy. I see that Victoria has their hand up. You want to go ahead, Victoria? It looks like they may have stepped away, so we'll come back to that. Oh, go ahead, Victoria.
Okay. Yeah, I just joined this meeting late and I apologize for that. But one thing that's becoming glaringly obvious to me is the difference between the Ford site and the Hillcrest site is that almost all of the development and developers are going to have to, they can't look for any kind of city subsidy other than just having the place cleaned up. And I think that's very short-sighted because the East Side has been so neglected for so many years. And, you know, I feel very strongly that this is, you know, if they're really hoping to bring in billions of dollars of tax revenue, you'd think they'd put their money where their mouth is and offer some options for people that might be interested in development or owning properties there, or even expanding on the ideas. I think Hillcrest, along with its industrial capabilities, could be less of a food desert if we not only developed a food program there where we're growing organic produce and distributing it and selling it, as well as providing jobs in our neighborhood, you know, and take away some of this food desert that we have. It's 1.5 miles almost in any direction to get to a grocery store, because I'm just near the border of the park. And I also say that if we allowed Maplewood to have a couple of seats at the table in the decision-making on this, what can we ask in parity or reciprocity in terms of helping us through the obvious growth, painful growth stages that this is going to go through to get it built and make it a strong part of the community, not just Maplewood, but St. Paul also. We want to be vital here, and we are losing ground fast because you say the east side of St. Paul and people are afraid, and it should not be that way.
Thank you, Victoria. I want to make sure we get to all the rest of the groups here. So room number 7, that looked like Amy and Worth, Gilbert, and Frank. We have Jay, Jane, Jean, John, Lisa, and Ron. Lots of J's there.
And you know what? I wasn't supposed to do this. Peter and Ben made clear that I'm supposed to be here tonight to listen, but my group elected me to report out. So I am just...
We'll permit that, Jane.
And if you didn't group, I just filled a hole that seemed to exist. Okay, I think we're getting, there are some very consistent themes here that I believe will make my group feel happy, to the point that there hasn't been enough community engagement. Our group completely agrees. And there is a feeling, because, and this is something I see on the east side, there is a feeling of hopelessness that even if people did have an opinion, nobody would care. And so their opinions don't matter. And I want to just say to all of us tonight that East Siders have got to let go of that. Pretend you live in Highland. Just for tonight, just we have got to make the same demands. And Romy and Victoria are exactly right. Ford was planned by the city for 10 years. Yeah. And so, and just saying. Okay, so also to speak to the concerns of my group that included some immediate neighbors, what is the impact going to be on our taxes as this commercial and industrial property is being developed? Is that going to make all of our residential taxes go up? And I think there are some really, we need to be concerned about that. We need to be concerned about displacement of existing neighbors. We talked about housing, and there was the discussion about the fact that single family housing still in our American life is the primary way to generate generational wealth. So should there not be some opportunity for single family dwellings? I want to point out that in the Ford site, they added single family housing. So keep that in mind. We talked about senior housing, and and I took this a little bit personally as somebody in my upper 60s, that baby boomers are dying off. So this idea that we're going to continue increasing senior housing is not necessarily a good idea. And we should be creating housing that is affordable to the people coming along. So whether that's affordable rental, or if it's also looking at, there was a discussion about, what about condos, affordable condominium development, so that people have the opportunity to build equity. There's a concern about traffic. The residential streets in this neighborhood should not be bearing the major access to the site. We should be using the major arterials, and we should not make it really difficult for the residential streets to continue to have peace and quiet. Great idea from somebody on the west side of town who was involved in the development that occurred at Snelling and Selby, is that the neighbors all need to hang in and get a win. There need to be things that the surrounding neighborhoods want and need that should make their lives better at the same time. They moved in next to a golf course. Now there's going to be a major development. So what might that look like? And it might be things like setbacks with trees, so that they're looking at trees and not the sides of buildings. And then finally, my own 2 cents, East Siders, don't give up, speak up, raise holy hell to get what we want for this neighborhood. I have heard tonight such a great confluence of ideas and opinions that really are not inconsistent. And so I think there really is an opportunity here. And my colleague, Nelsie Yang, who had to leave early, she is such a community person. And I feel confident that we have the opportunity to make sure that all the input is listened to here. So I just want to congratulate everybody and the Freedom Library and Ben Warner for this incredible opportunity to kind of get outside of the official public process and really get the conversation going among people who have a lot to offer.
Thank you, Jean.
Councilmember Prince, I'm still here.
Okay.
Oh, you are, Nelsie, sorry.
Excellent. All right, we're hitting time here. Let's quickly go to group number 8 and then 9, and then we'll close up. So group number 8, we had, all right, go ahead.
We talked about what we would like to see, community spaces, open space, green space, that is walkable. We talked a lot about housing to meet the diverse needs, and talked about providing paths to ownership as reparations. So we have this huge property and an opportunity to provide reparations in some way, hopefully to close that wealth gap of homeownership.
Thank you. Okay, room number 9, that was David, Jenna, Joe, LaSims, Nelsie, and Sarah.
I can report out here. We covered many of the topics that have already been mentioned, so the first was intentionally creating housing for multiple generations. So building for children and parents, but also focusing on seniors. And then being intentional in creating housing or supporting businesses that would join groups together. So the need for food in the area was voiced, along with the idea of possibly having greenhouses or horticulture spaces that could bring different age groups together. Also, connectivity with surrounding spaces was important. So making the space walkable, making sure that it's not broken up by large parking spaces. A concern was that warehouses tend to be very large and with mainly one level with then a lot of parking spaces nearby. So a desire to not have those as barriers within the space. There was the desire shared for the city to be using every tool available to create and incentivize deeply affordable housing, 30% AMI. There were some questions voiced about the engagement process and about the overall timeline and kind of what questions will get addressed at which stage. There was a sentiment of how it's 112 acres and that's a lot of space. And right now the main considerations are just zoning. So it's not really talking about some of the other things that were mentioned earlier, like food, childcare. And then we also talked about wanting to make the space memorable and useful in terms of having an engaging natural element or park space that the local community can take pride in. So something that is worth it to visit from the surrounding area and also makes going to local businesses more enjoyable because you can go to one and the other. And then anyone else have anything to share, please chime in.
Well, I think that was everyone. Here are the next steps. We're going to summarize all these notes into a document and mail them out. At some point in the future, we're going to plan a follow-up meeting as this continues to develop. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. You know, Zoom is a hard format, especially to come and be together in community with. So I really commend you for taking time to be here. Please talk to your neighbors about what's going on. You know, I think it's really important that we're reaching out to our community to bring as many voices into this as possible. So just thank you for being here. I think it means a lot. And for those of you who are with the Port of the City, thank you also for coming tonight. I think it's an opportunity for you to see someone that's not in one of the official kind of means to put this together and try and give community a space and a platform. So I appreciate all those from the city and Port that came out tonight as well. I will be sending out the entire presentation from this evening. You'll have my contact information if you want to talk to me about this at any point in time. Please reach out and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. But again, thank you very much for being here tonight, and I will email out another event sometime in the next few weeks, and we'll come back together again. So thank you very much for being here.
Peace and love. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Good night.
Thank you, Peter.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah.